There's quite a few Panther biographies and autobiographies that have come out. I would say personally is probably the one that's affected me most. It's a very inspiring book, but more than being purely inspiration, it's actually a very interesting and a very thought-provoking and educative book, because she actually talks, it's not just celebrating all of this amazing stuff that we did, and it's not just commiserating all of this terrible stuff that happened to me and my community and my movement, but it's reflecting in a very serious, a very analytical, and not even, she doesn't necessarily draw that many conclusions, but she's trying to bring about a discussion of how we were able to build this vibrancy of movement up, and then how we were able to lose it, how the enemy was able to defeat it. And her major conclusion is essentially that we were defeated by divide and rule. And there's an objective factor to that, and there's a subjective factor to that. The objective factor is that the state, the FBI, the CIA, the United States government, the police, they threw everything at us. They did everything they could. Demonization, slander, sabotage, false phone calls, false letters, whispering campaigns against various leaders. Every trick in the book they used against us because they wanted to break us. As far as the US state was concerned, the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Movement and the radical movement in general at that time that was developing unity around this base of the Black Panthers was an existential threat that had to be wiped out, and they did what they could do to wipe our movement out. The subjective factor was that we let it happen to us. There's always more that we can do to build unity and defend ourselves against a strategy that we know they're going to use. They've been using it for hundreds of years. This idea of divide and rule doesn't start in the 1960s in the United States. It's a term that's been popular since the time of the Roman Empire. That's how the Roman Empire kept its hold for such a long time, through divide and rule. It's something that I've been reading a lot about Brazil recently, and the setting up of a colony in Brazil. A lot of people don't know actually that more people were taken from Africa as slaves to Brazil than to any other country. And what would happen when the planters were setting up plantations, they would get slaves from as many different parts of Africa with as many different cultures and as many different languages as possible, so that they would not know how to relate to each other, so that they would find it very difficult to build any unity, because the only language they even had to relate to each other in was a very basic Portuguese, the Portuguese that they'd been taught to receive instructions as slaves. They didn't share religion, they didn't share language, they didn't share culture. But nonetheless, in spite of that very intense divide and rule, they built unity because it was the only option that they had. If they didn't build unity, it was a question of survival. If they didn't build unity, and through that unity managed to escape and build up palenques, maroon camps, slave encampments, where they set up very successful free states that lasted in some cases for decades, in the case of Palmares for maybe 50, 60, 70 years. They were only able to do that because they built militant unity. And that's the lesson that we have to take today, to take it back to what Sean was saying. How does all of this relate to our situation today? We have to build unity. At the global level, the enemy, imperialism, colonialism, white supremacy, does everything it possibly can to keep oppressed people divided, keep oppressed countries divided, keep oppressed nations divided, keep oppressed communities divided. You just look at the news media, the international news media, which is based in Washington, in New York, in London, in Paris, in the Western capitals. It's like its sole purpose is to keep us divided. Okay, we want to bomb Libya, so let's start talking about how terrible Gaddafi is. And then everyone will believe it, and no one will come to the defense of Libya when we start bombing it. We want to bomb Syria. Okay, so let's start a massive demonization and propaganda campaign against Syria. Oh, hold on. Mugabe and ZANU-PF in Zimbabwe are taking land, African land, away from rich white farmers. So let's start a massive demonization campaign there. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which has been mentioned before today, they've been resisting us for 60 years. And not only that, they're developing the weapons, nuclear weapons, so that we can't just bomb them into oblivion.